I want to start first and foremost by giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Mount Stone, and salutations to the Akim pushing his word in all sincerity and in all truth. Peace and blessings to the elect, starting with the 144,000, as well as the large multitude, the men, women, and children whom the Lord have foreordained to receive mercy. Shalom. Now, this lesson is going to be entitled either Crisis Legislation or Disaster Capitalism, right? And pretty much, the Spirit was leading me along the lines of thinking about how, the powers that be right now use crises to pass certain legislation that would not pass under normal circumstances. And that was sparked, by watching different elders and apostles and brothers do videos, going into the LA fires and other different, crises, that have come up, in recent times, and how different legislation have been proposed and passed in order to solve, these problems that are created by these crises. So I decided at first I tried to Google, this answer, but the AI wasn't responding. It was just giving me articles and different links. So I decided to go to the Meta AI and ask the question, are times of crises used to change laws? Right? And this is the answer that I got. We're going to go into it, go into a few precepts, and hopefully this lesson is edifying. So it says, yes, times of crisis have often been used to change laws, implement new policies, or consolidate power. This phenomenon is sometimes referred to as crisis legislation or disaster capitalism, and then it goes into different examples. The Patriot Act, enacted in response to 9/11, the law expanded surveillance powers of law enforcement agencies. This would not have passed under normal circumstances. The USA Freedom Act, right, passed in response to Edward Snowden's revelation of NSA surveillance. The law reformed certain aspects of surveillance authorities. Emergency Powers Act 1920, UK, right, granted the British government sweeping powers to respond to emergencies, including the authority to suspend laws and regulations. The Enabling Act 1933, Germany, allowed the Nazi government to bypass the Reichstag, right, and pass laws without parliamentary approval, consolidating Hitler's power, right? And then it goes into types of crisis-induced laws: national security and surveillance, economic crisis response, public health emergency, and we saw that with the pandemic a few years back. Environmental disasters, we're seeing that now with the LA fires and other things that are happening that are being blamed on climate change, right? Erosion of civil liberties, and this is also important. Crisis-induced laws may compromise individual freedoms such as privacy, speech, or assembly. And as a brother, I was watching a video by the brother Qualcomm. 10 years ago, most people wouldn't agree to take a microchip implant, but fast forward to now, right? It's something that most people would consider doing, and then with the right crisis, you tip the scales even more, right, to where the majority of people will just take it, because during times of crisis, you can pretty much push anything on the people, and they will accept it, as long as it is a solution to get them out of the situation that they're in. Right? It says power consolidation. Governments may exploit crises to centralize power, undermine checks and balances, or suppress dissent. And I wanted to read an example of that. Well, first, let's read this precept. Right, Isaiah 10:1, woe to them that decree unrighteous decrees and that write grievousnesses which they have prescribed. So these things are written aforehand. These laws, that will solve the problem are written aforehand. Katab, right? It says to grave, by implication, to write, to describe, to record, to prescribe, to subscribe, right? To write, to record, to enroll. All right, I wanted to look up specifically the word prescribe, right, in the dictionary, and it says prescribe. So the first one is medical practitioner, so we won't talk about that one, right? It says state authoritatively or as a rule that an action or procedure should be carried out, and the word pre means before, and scribe means to write. So even if we go to the etymology of the word and we go to prescribe, right? It says to write down as a direction, law, or rule. Write down right before, prefix in writing, ordained, determined in advance, right? So advise, appoint, or designate as a remedy for a disease. So they create a crisis, right? And then there are laws that are already put in place as the remedy for that crisis that was written beforehand, right? So we can go back to some of the examples, right? Right? Some of the examples: the Patriot Act, the USA Freedom Act, the Emergency Powers Act, Enabling Act, right? We can think back even further to when Nero burned down the Colosseum and blamed the Christians, and used that as a means to persecute the Christians, right? So I went further. Oh yeah, I was gonna bring out an example, of using crisis to consolidate power. Right? This is Genesis 47 verse 15, and this is when Joseph, was I think he was second in command, or governor of Egypt when the famine came, right? So it says, and when money failed in Egypt, matter of fact, I wanted to read it in the NLT, so it's a bit clearer, right? It says, when the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, all the Egyptians came to Joseph. Our money is gone, they cried, but please give us food or we will die before your very eyes. Joseph replied, since your money is gone, bring me your livestock, I will give you food in exchange for your livestock. So they brought their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food, in exchange for their horses, flocks of sheep, and goat, herds of cattle, and donkeys, and Joseph provided them with food for another year. But that year ended, and the next year they came again and said, we cannot hide the truth from you, my lord. Our money is gone, and our livestock and our cattle are yours. We have nothing left to give but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your very eyes? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We offer our land and ourselves as slaves to Pharaoh. Just give us grain that we may live and not die, right? And so the land does not become empty and desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold him their fields because the famine was severe, and soon all the land belonged to Pharaoh. As for the people, he made them all slaves from one end of Egypt to another. Now, this is consolidation of power, right? This is eroding civil liberties and those things, right? But this would not have happened under normal circumstances unless the Pharaoh decided to go to war against the people. But using this crisis of a famine, right, Joseph consolidated power in Egypt. First, he took the livestock and the cattle, right, which is their resources. Then when that was gone, he took their land. And then when that was gone, he took what? He took themselves as slaves, right? So it's the same crisis legislation, or what was in the other term it called it? So there's crisis legislation, and then there's disaster capitalism, right? So if you think to the MOTB, right, the United Nations Pact for the Future, all these things are driven, right, by crises or potential crises that are going to happen that they are so-called trying to avert or trying to save us from, right? So I went further to ask, the AI, do you think that governments and international bodies intentionally create crises in order to pass legislation that would not pass during normal times? The answer is, so this is the answer, a question that sparks debate and controversy. While it's difficult to prove intentional crisis creation, there are instances where governments and international bodies have exploited or manipulated crises to advance their agendas. And here it gives you some really good theories that brothers have brought out over the years, right? Problem, reaction, solution. This concept, popularized by David Icke, suggests that governments create and exacerbate problems, wait for public reaction, and then offer a predetermined solution that expands their power. And that goes into the Hegelian dialectic, right? Or pressure from above, pressure from below. It's the same thing, problem, reaction, solution. Crisis management. Some critics argue that governments and international bodies use crisis management techniques to create a sense of urgency, justifying drastic measures that might not be possible during normal times. And we saw that with the pandemic, right? It was a sense of urgency was created using mass media, using the mainstream media that this thing is it's deadly. People are dropping like flies. Same thing happening. What is happening over there in China right now? The mainstream media is pushing it as if but people that are there are saying that it's just a flu, right? So sometimes they use things like the mainstream media, celebrities, or even agent provocateurs that are on these social media sites as calling themselves alternative media, and they use them to create a sense of urgency, as it says, right, and use that fear, right, to bring about drastic changes that you wouldn't be able to pass during normal times. Shock doctrine. Right, Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism, argues that governments and corporations exploit crises to implement neoliberal economic policies and consolidate power. And it gives the example again of the Reichstag fire. Right, the Nazi Party exploited the arson attack to pass the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil liberties and consolidated Hitler's power. The Gulf of Tonkin incident. The US government used this disputed naval clash to escalate involvement in the Vietnam War. 9/11 attacks, the 2008 financial crisis, right? So then it starts to do some, damage control, right? While some cases, it says correlation does not imply causation. While some crises may be exploited for political gain, it is essential to distinguish between intentional crisis creation and simply taking advantage of opportunities. Complexity of global events, need for critical thinking and scrutiny. But yeah, the point is made. The point is made. Let's bring out a few precepts here. A few more precepts here. This is Psalm chapter 10, verse 1. Why standest thou afar off, O Yahweh? Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble? The wicked in his pride does persecute the poor. Let him be taken in the devices that they have imagined. And that's exactly what's going to happen, right? Especially as it concerns to the thermonuclear missiles, That's going to be their destruction, right? For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blessed the covetous whom the Lord abhors, right? And you see how boldly they speak, for example, about the UN Pact for the Future, their smart cities agenda that they're pushing forward, the carbon agenda. And that's a really big one. That is a really perfect example of contemporary crisis management, or contemporary disaster capitalism, or, as I say, crisis legislation. They're using this idea of climate change to push forward this carbon agenda, where your everything that you do, right, is tracked based on how much carbon that activity will, quote unquote, consume. So the food you eat, how much you travel, the resources you consume, all of that is tied back to your personal carbon allowance, and then that is used, to then control your movements, all in the name of what? Protecting the planet, averting a crisis, right? It says, the wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after Yahweh. Yahweh is not in all his thoughts, right? Because he believes that he's God. Matter of fact, he believes that the AI that he has created is God, and as different brothers have brought out, specifically, the Elder Shapar from here in Jamaica, brought out that it's AI that they're going to use to govern the system that's coming, right? So they believe in their AI as God. His ways are always grievous. Thy judgments are far about out of his sight for all his enemies. He puffeth at them. He saith in his heart, I shall not be moved. I shall never be in adversity. Because they believe that this plan that they have to come to pass is gonna come to pass no matter what. There's nothing that you can do, because they know that under the right amount of stress and crises, people will buckle. Just like we brought out the example of the famine in Egypt. People would not have given up their cattle and their lands and themselves into slavery under normal circumstances, but using the right amount of pressure, people will fold, right? So when you're told that, you can't get government services without accepting the CBDC or without accepting the microchip implant, what are you gonna do, right? During World War II, for example, there were rationing cards that were given out in order for you to collect money and collect food, Salakia, right? So what will happen when the new rationing card, which is the microchip, is gonna be given out? When that's your only way of receiving income through universal basic income, because everybody pretty much gonna lose their jobs to AI and robots, right? So it says, his mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity, yo. Right? He sitteth in the lurking places of the villages. In the secret places does he murder the innocent. His eyes are privily set against the poor. And if you even going into the what's happening now in LA, it's being brought out that State Farm and other major insurance companies pulled the insurance policies of tens of thousands of homes months before the fire, because they were saying there's an increased risk of wildfires in the region, and if they didn't do that, then they would face financial failure, right? I mean, come on, right? Let's bring out this final precept here. Job chapter 5 verse 12. He disappointed, meaning Yahweh, disappointed the devices of the crafty so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. So we know ultimately the Heavenly Father, right, through his son Yahweh Shai and the holy angels is going to put a stop to this man, yo. Because as scripture, as Yahweh Shai said, if the days were not shortened, not even the elect would survive, yo. Right? He taketh the wise in their own craftiness, and the counsel of the forward is carried headlong. They meet in darkness in the daytime and grope in the noonday as in the night. But he saveth the poor from the sword, from their mouth, and from the hand of the mighty, so that the poor, which is the elect, right, hath hope, right? And iniquity stoppeth her mouth. So through Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai, we have hope that we will be delivered from the jaws of the trap that, you know, the enemy, you know, is encircling us with, you, because without Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai, there's no way out of the system, the trap that they are setting, right? It's a perfect trap, right? So hopefully